Hello and welcome to an episode of the Transfer Podcast that we didn't think we'd be doing. But you know what? There are a lot of transfer stories, rumors, and sort of angles that we had nowhere near our minds. Some of our darkest fears, some of our wildest anxieties, it would appear have come to roost in the last couple of days. Now, whether or not there's anything to these things, we are duty-bound to discuss them with you because they're out there, and that's what this show is all about. So let's welcome the man who does that best, Mr. Dave Davis. How are you doing, buddy?
I was a little bit down after the Carabao Cup when I'd lifted a bit and got past it. But then with everything that's been said and gone on in the last 24 hours, it brings me, Trev, to the quieter words of St. Francis of Assisi, who... Great. In the unwritten verse that never made it through to the Bible and the Council of Nicaea, famously quoted, "What the fuck is going on? It is Tuesday." And honestly, I just don't. I've never almost had in this short a period since we last talked to this could be happening. No, it's not. Shut up, you English liar. All sorts of things going on. We have got a million things to get into, and I'm kind of looking forward to this one.
I've always been a fan of the insight of St. Francis of Assisi on this show. It feels like he speaks directly to us on a regular basis. And you know what, man? You've just said something that we can't just let go. It's important to lean into this. Many of the transfer shows we've done, we have been desperately wishing something was happening, even if it was a bit wild. But it feels as if nowhere near the amount of mad rumors have ever been present in such a short period of time, which utterly necessitated us getting on here and just having a chat about them. It is a lot. There's a lot. And I'm like you, I watched the game with a pal of mine, Donald, in Wicklow, and we were chilled out and it was grand. And we were both a bit nonplussed at the end, but also disappointed when your team loses the final. The nature of the loss, the fact that what struck me most about that performance, Dave, and there was a little bit of it in Europe, but not as much, was that the lads looked a bit shell-shocked. I was looking at Mo Salah, and everybody's very keen to say, well, Ramadan, he's tired, and fatigue, and so on. But there was something about the way lads were carrying themselves, expressions on their face, they looked a bit more than fatigued, a bit more than wiped. And my conspiracy brain was going wild. I was like, has there been a fallout? Is there some big story behind the scenes that we don't know about? And then all of a sudden, it's not very helpful that all these big stories have appeared. So, I mean, there's so many places for us to start, but we'll try and keep to the structure that you had sent on to me earlier on, because it'll help us to sort of get a bit of a feel for it. So just bear with me for a second here, because I have it in the wrong place and I want to make sure that we go according to our schedule. So let's start off with the biggest story of all. And it's good because it's an in story. And it's where we like to start with a little bit of positivity. There are links. We'll start with Alvarez, but there are also links with Cesco. There's talk about Isak. I think all of those I have very definite opinions on. The rank and file of journos range from Mr. Sam Maguire, ex of this parish, to young Pornstein, and of course Mr. Romano throwing in his tuppence worth as well. So let's start with that Alvarez story, Dave, because it's huge and there's so many angles to it, including a potential outgoing that might be linked to it.
It's mad that this broke on Friday evening, wasn't it? About 4 days ago. And with everything that happened, Trev, it seems an eternity ago in a way. But literally on Friday evening, Sam Maguire came out, that pesky little bugger, didn't he, with an exclusive saying that Liverpool have Julian Alvarez on their radar. And we had a little bit of hope because we had the last January of the Hodgson kind of but now we're a new meme, you're telling me there's a chance, Jim Carrey style. So we were a bit excited about this one. And listen, for various reasons, goals, assists, the player, Premiership pedigree, him banging in goals against Real Madrid, Barcelona the other night, that this is a player we were like, yes, you can easily envisage this boy being a forward for Liverpool. No doubts about it at all. Also, as was mentioned last summer, and Sam Maguire, to be fair, mentioned it in his article, that Liverpool looked at him last summer. And this is really important for anyone that doubted that and may missed it. His agent, Trev Hidalgo, came out and said, yes, we did speak to Liverpool representatives last summer, but naturally the deal wasn't done. And as Sam mentions, and it's true, City were never going to sell to us, were they? And the player back to Simeone, Argentina. But it's important to remember that it's a fact that the agent has said Liverpool were interested. So that's the first one on the scoreboard. Now, he also said, the agent, it's the wrong time to talk about my client's future because of important tournaments. And this was before the Champions League and various things. So that made sense. Then, Trev, even today, and I'm probably going to butcher his name, but Carlos Bossero, what a name for a sporting director, Atletico Bossman, I'm sure they called him. He said, talking about Liverpool making an official offer to sign our player is not true. And what is being circulated is just rumours. He is a key and important player in our project, and we have no intention of abandoning him. Now, it is important to remember, because I've seen people talk about this and misquote it. Sam Maguire's article does not say Liverpool have made an offer. Let's just be crystal clear on that. It says Liverpool are interested in the player and intrigued, and also mentioned that last summer, when he's amongst many other players, which we'll come to. So the fact that Bosero's saying that, he's almost answering a point that wasn't asked, if that makes sense, which is a little bit strange. But it's the fact that he says he is a key player and we have no intention of abandoning him. And I get that. People are saying so. There's zero chance with Alvarez, not a go whatsoever. My only point to that would be, and just for the record, people, this is not me saying that I think it will happen. It's likely anything like that. Trev, what are you expecting Mr. Bostero to say? Yes, he's our player right now, but we are going to try for a fat fee in the summer and all that type. Like, what are we honestly expecting the sporting director of Atletico Madrid to say at this time? Of course he's going to deny it. Of course he's going to do this. Absolutely. Now, again, from digging and trying to get as much as we can, and also messaging Sam to go, what the fuck, Maguire? Where was our info or heads up type of thing a little bit as well, and trying to go around it, has been a case of, yeah, Liverpool have got an interest in this player. It is clear, it's obvious, no doubts about it. Does that make him likely to go to Anfield? I am not going to put a percentage on that and say I think there's this chance, because we just don't know. We're just guessing, in all honesty. But what is clear from digging around, Liverpool do like this player. Now, this is where we can proper get 2 and 2 and make 27. And I love a good jump, as you know, Trev. Ignore the fact it's Ben Jacobs, spoofer, and, think about everything that's come out recently. It came out last summer. Atletico Madrid do like Darwin Nunez. And it's come out with a few today, Edo Burgos and Ben Jacobs saying that, they do like him. And the problem is, I think it's pie the sky anyway from this, but make it out, it's a 35 to 40 million euro bid for Darwin Nunez. I mean, let's be honest. We know what we turned down from the Saudis in January, so it's not going to jump down that much, is it? Let's be honest. But people, all we can say is, as we mentioned last time, our info is that Atletico Madrid like Darwin Nunez. Does that mean there's going to be a definitive swap for Julian Alvarez? No, that is just random speculation. But we are on the transfer show. We love speculation. We love the fact that Liverpool are being linked with a player like Julian Alvarez, and it's a realistic lick. Is it a realistic move? That's a different question. But him and a couple of others, Trev, we are talking incomings for once.
That is so exciting as a story. A few things that come to mind there. First of all, I think Alvarez as a profile of a player would be just kind of ideal for us. And of course, you come to realize, don't you, that everything's up for grabs at the moment. We'll get back to that. That's kind of the big topic that I want to discuss, because it's been just eating my mind alive, how much up for grabs everything and everybody is. But Dude, look at that lad's cheekbones. Like, how can we not want to? How can we not want to sign those cheekbones if nothing else? But here's the thing that's eating me, right? I understand what you're saying about the valuation, and I understand that we're talking about a Romano style spoofer here as well. But if there's anything to it, and we do know that there was a little bit of interest from Atletico in the past in Darwin, if there's anything to it, the valuation could be wildly different because it might be part of an exchange. So that's where you'd have to begin to sort of maybe, well, okay, let's allow the dream to live in our brains for a second. And that's the only thing that makes sense to me. But my question to you is the one that I asked you when we were chatting earlier on WhatsApp. Do you see any way in the world that Diego Simeone does that deal? That's what kind of kills me. Now, you had an interesting angle on this, and I'd like you to repeat it for the listeners and the viewers.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, it seems a stretch. I mean, the valuations seem wildly different, especially as we talked about with the Saudis and what they were prepared to pay for Darwin in the summer, or in Jan, sorry, just gone. I wouldn't rule it out, Trev, completely. I think it's still a bit of a stretch because of the difference in the valuations between the two. But I can also see Nunez. He is a Simeone style forward, isn't he? He's a bit mad. He's a bit crazy. He'd run his heart out. You know, he's got pace and he would press and go from there. And now, to be honest, I swear I said something else in the WhatsApp, but I can't remember because we've exchanged about 8,000 messages today. So I probably said something else to you.
It was mostly that idea of the profile of him as a nut job.
Yeah.
Maybe fitting in nicely with the nut job that is Diego Simeone. But you can see in the comments, man, it's wild. Like, so many people have such strong opinions. Some people there hate Alvarez. Some people think, Alvarez, what chance have we got of getting that guy? It's you know. And by the way, lad, you know, like, knock yourselves out in there, but please don't expect us to be engaging with the more extreme stuff, because you know that's not what we do here. You did mention another couple of names though, and I want to keep focusing on the incomings or potential incomings before we start getting back to the ridiculous amount of outgoing stories. So let's have a look, if we could, at the idea of Cesco, because we'll finish with Isak only because I think it's probably even less likely than an Alvarez, primarily for a couple of things. One, the money. Two, the fact that Newcastle will have ambitions now. Why would they want to let their player go, who's their best player and apparently beloved by the owners as well? So we'll put that on the back burner. Let's go to the Cesco thing, because obviously we are going to have to recruit at least a striker, if not four, depending on your worry level. What's the angle with that? I hadn't seen those stories recently at all.
Yeah, Sam mentioned Benjamin Cesco, the Slovenian, the Red Bull Leipzig forward, big, tall stature. Almost in a way, I think you could describe him as profile, a bit like Darwin-Nunez, is in a physical profile, quite tall, quick, not electric, I wouldn't say, but very quick for his size, gets quite a few headed goals. I think the thing with Cesco is there's just such a gap, to be honest, between Alvarez and Isak to Cesco. It's so pronounced. Cesco would feel more like one of those gamble signings a little bit, but the problem is when you're gambling, when you're taking a punt, you're probably taking a punt, Trev, at something like 60 million or around that mark, because people do keep saying there's a release clause for Benjamin Cesco. That is not quite the case. There is a gentleman's agreement, as many will tell you, between Leipzig and Cesco when he signed his renewal, that based on various factors, he can be allowed to leave for a certain amount. So there was offers for him last summer. He chose to stay, probably quite wisely at Red Bull Leipzig, to further his career and develop that way. The big problem is, and it's funny that I'll put this on the screen because John P's just said this. Me and Bart's did a show and profiled on him the other way. Very almost Nunez style, doesn't quite carry the profile of a standard striker, long distance shooting. I called him a bit of a FIFA player, a bland merchant, a highlights reel. So doesn't quite stack up with what we'd be looking for, maybe not as refined. So all the info we've got is, absolutely. We've looked at Cesco. He is being considered. My worry about Cesco is, Trev, if he comes to real fruition, it means we're probably at 5 and 6 on the list, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And I'm glad you highlighted that comment, because any of the good analysis that's being done by people like Bart's behind the scenes here on the channel, we want to amplify as much as possible. So it's good to see that. And yeah, like, I mean, it's a very valid point as well. Quite what Arne Slot wants, though, I think is probably evolving. I think just as his ability to manage in the Champions League is going to evolve on the back of the exit to PSG the other night, I think there may be some sea changes in how he goes about managing in the Premier League, and with the profile of player that he's looking for and with his ideas for tactics. It stands to reason there'll be some evolution. The last one is Isak, and you can already hear people saying that's not going to happen, never going to happen, too much money, blah, blah, blah. Okay, right. Well, but it's the most persistent rumor by a mile, and we saw how effective he is. He had the ball in the net against us twice on Sunday. He's clearly excellent and would be tremendous, but it does seem as though the valuation that we're hearing being mentioned would be something that would be entirely prohibitive, unless we do end up doing something like selling our entire front line. Which, I mean, people can laugh all they want, and it's. Yeah. I actually heard, Dave, someone say, "Oh, well, you want to get rid of all these guys who've gotten us to 12 points clear at the top of the league." Nobody said we want to get rid of them. I don't want to get rid of any of them. I'd like to keep Darwin. I'd like to keep Shota. I'd like to keep Mo. I'd like to keep every one of our attackers, actually. But the point is, Diaz is the only one who I think may actually be happier to go, and I think Nunez is probably not going to make it to be what we want him to be. But I still like these guys. It's not about wanting to get rid of them. It's about like what's looking likely. You've got Shota, who is going to be worth some money now when he gets back from injury and gets a run of play. You've got Nunez, who we've been offered huge amounts of money for, and who might decide to take the bag and look after his family. And Diaz might do the same. And then you've got Mo Salah, who we can't seem to offer enough money to for reasons. So, like, that entire unit is up for grabs, Dave. That's the reality of it. That's how we have to. That's how we have to talk about this. So, let's talk about Isak just to wrap this up in terms of a really high-profile, tremendous sort of plug-and-play, top-notch, top-tier player that we could go and get if we were to sell 2 or 3 of those boys.
Yeah, a little bit different from the others. I mean, the question mark is around Isak's injury record, isn't it? I think that's what people, and I understand, look at more than anything for a big money signing. You can't just ignore that at all. But different, whereas Alvarez is a goal scorer, but also more of a facilitator, a more all-round player. Cesco, as I called him, a bit of a bland merchant, more potential. As you said, Isak is a plug-and-play, ready-made elite 9. Through the middle striker, gets goals. And if anyone doubts that, unfortunately, as we found out, he likes a goal against us. We've proved that, haven't we? Time and time again, he does score. He's an elite finisher. He's in probably your top, 3-5 forwards in the world. I don't think you'd find anyone to debate that in the number 9 position right now. You're right. It's so bizarre, Trev, that I think what people struggle to reconcile is there's so many hurdles, as we said on the last show, that if Newcastle get the Champions League, I think that knocks it down anyway. Guess who style? Forget that, number 1. The fee, the injury record, all those things you can stack as in not going to happen. I get that completely. However, the reason we talk about this, Sam Maguire, David Ornstein, Romano, all the patch journalists have clearly said Liverpool like Alexander Isak, and that name just doesn't go away. And the one thing also to sort of play on, when The Athletic did a Q&A with David Ornstein, he was asked a generic question about, Liverpool. Who are they looking at? Not like, are they looking at A, B, C? And he asked about the forward line. He says, I've not heard too much. What I have heard, though, is Liverpool are in and like Alexander Isak. So it's not us just springing a name from nowhere. Let's be clear on that. This name just keeps coming up time and time again. And I get people, like you said, they're not going to happen. We know about the Champions League. We know about the fee. We know about the injury record. But we can't just ignore a name that is mentioned time and time again.
Yeah, I was really enjoying your little list of journalists there. It felt like that, was it Norwegian dude back in the day? Maggie Thatcher, that one is just like, and it will be those boys will take one hell of a beating if none of these stories pan out, except they won't really, will they? Because they can't lose. And you see, this is what we have to understand about it. It's not to suggest or to denigrate any of these guys with their intentions. I'm sure they honestly report information as they get it, for the most part. But it just does feel a bit like they can't lose anyway, because you just throw the story out there, everyone's going to go wild reacting to it. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. If it does happen, you're the greatest man in the world. Look at you, you were there first. It's a kind of win-win scenario for the boys, to be fair to them. And a lot of people there in the chat talking about the availability of our top choice there, Isak, and it's a fine point. To be fair, it is a fine point. We're not going to want to get rid of, say, Diogo Jota, and take in someone who has, an equally patchy injury history. That doesn't make any sense. No. And you mentioned Alvarez isn't 100% there either. So it's what do we know? But these are the stories we're having to deal with. And you may have noticed, I'm treading water in the happy section a little bit, because at least we're talking about people coming in. Because all we've got to do now, dude, is talk about. We just focused on the strikers. Now let's talk about the defenders, all of whom look like they're up for grabs as well, because there is wild Virgil stuff going on. We'll go there first. But linked to that, and separate to that, but somehow linked to that in my mind, and I think in reality, is Konate stuff. And linked to Trent, and absolutely joined at the hip with Trent, is the Bradley stuff that's going on in terms of his contract. Yeah. And we're going to keep returning to the fact that agents are in a good spot just now with Liverpool Football Club. And why would they do anything until they get exactly what they want? So let's start with the Virgil stuff. We can't avoid it any longer. What do we make of it? Where is it coming from? How truthful do you think it is? Because I've seen stuff there from the international manager, Koeman, and I'll be honest with you, they're the quotes that freak me out the most.
Yeah, and there is so much to cover just on this. If I do pass out talking about this, Trev, just put like a technical issues banner up and I'll grab an inhaler or something and we'll keep going. But let's get right into this. I mean, Stan Maguire, you little swine. Yeah, you just literally the other night, wasn't it? Yesterday evening, because we were calm before this. Let's just rewind a little bit further, Trev. The Van Dijk embargo comments have come out, and we'd all been, yeah, I'm calm. We'll see. Like it's even a chance I could run it down, and then we agree after the season. We were all quite calm. We were relaxed.
Well. Let's just last show. We did discuss the phraseology that Virgil used, where it was like, if anyone tells you that the deal is done, they're lying to your face. And it was quite extreme. And I think it was a certain red flag, Dave. It was a red flag. And if you're not reading the red flag into that language, why do you say that in that way? You don't, unless you're desperately trying to make a point. So, yeah, there was a level of calm, but definitely red flag planted.
Yeah, wasn't the reassurance in that line. That is a fair point we were looking for. And then we definitely didn't get the reassurance, because this came out from Sam Maguire, didn't it, the other evening, that PSG are all in on Virgil van Dijk. Liverpool won't break the bank, as it says, to retain their club captain, but they do want him to stay. And as per the article, it did feel that the detail that Liverpool want him to stay on their terms. And the detail in the article that with the offer, it's huge, isn't it? It's a big signing on fee. It's big wages, far more than we would offer after tax. A loyalty signing on fee, I think that they call it, and Sam mentions as well. Also, PSG, a Nike club. So that helps, Virgil be the face, a Nike athlete. So there's that. And I see people going, he won't go to that, that level and all those. And there's a few other bits to come, like you mentioned about Koeman. The little bit then you thought, remember that photo when he was in the tunnel with Campos and El Khalifi, the PSG bodies, weren't they? You all of a sudden thought, that doesn't quite sit nicely. Not that Virgil's doing anything wrong at all. Let's just be clear. He's in the last 6 months of his deal. He can speak to anyone he wants. So he's breaking nothing, and his agent are doing absolutely nothing wrong by doing this. It's the fact we've let it get to this stage that you have to bring into the mix. So that was a bit of a worry. Then, as you said, Ronald Koeman even just today says, when he was asked about his future, whether he signs with Liverpool or another big club, that's all good for me. We'll see what happens. And what I understand from Virgil is that he's still looking for the level he's at now. The thing about that comment is, and sometimes, you know, you can read too much into it, but you can only deal with what you've got. You started to think, didn't you, Trev, like, yeah, because we've heard about the Saudi and we've heard that dismissed because he's not ready for that. He's talked about wanting to stay playing for Holland a few years at the top, so that makes sense. But then you look at where PSG are now and how they're set up with a sort of a young, hungry team, and they're doing well in the Champions League. And you actually just started to think, you could see it in a way, couldn't you? Big money, maybe thinks I've done everything I can do at Liverpool. You can't just ignore that completely, as much as we want to dismiss it and we're all desperate for him to sign. You know, that sort of played into your mind. And then the pièce de résistance, literally an hour ago or so, France declared war on England journalists, didn't they? Because as Julian Alvarez tweeted there is nothing between PSG and Virgil van Dijk. No talks, no negotiations, no 100 million signing on fee offer, anything like that. Nothing. That's not quite what Sam Maguire said, but you can tell what he's referring to there, and says, no, he just had a chat with those two, but there's no doubt about his future. So all of a sudden we're thinking like, Maguire, Lawrence, let's go. We're on between, like, who's right, who's wrong type of thing, which makes it interesting. The thing about this is we're probably not going to find out immediately, aren't we? It's going to take a month or two till something comes to the surface. As Virgil said, we'll know before the end of the season. So I suppose the only thing on this now, Trev, is it's not going. We're not hearing what we want to. And I understand why people are thinking, okay, Virgil saying this, Ronald Koeman saying this, I'm hearing this about PSG. You almost hope Julian Alvarez is right and there isn't anything in it. But the longer and longer it goes, you are start to thinking like, is it some part of something more, which I know we'll come on to at the same time later. But I don't think anyone's sitting quite as comfortable considering what were we told weeks ago. And I mean weeks ago, we had numerous journalists telling us like, all the noises we're hearing are Salah, Van Dijk expected to re-sign, Trent probably going. And now here we are today with all this.
So two things that jump out at me. Like I said, the phrasing of the Koeman stuff. It was the last line, the one about, you know, from what I understand it from Virgil, that basically he wants to stay at the level that he's at now. Right. So the conversation has gone to some point with Koeman, between him and Virgil, that the reality of movement away from Liverpool, but to stay at a high level club, that's occurred apparently.
Yeah.
If we're to take Koeman on his word, he has the reality of a potential move has been broached in the conversation between two of them. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. That's way too close. The idea that we are in this situation, I can't get my head around it. This is probably not the part of the show where we start talking about who or what is responsible for why we are where we are and where people may be losing the plot a little bit with who they're blaming. But it's regardless of how we got here, we should not be here. And it's very, very frustrating. That's one thing. The second thing with it as well is I did hear it spun that the chat between Virgil and the two lads in the tunnel after the PSG game was actually Armand saying, you know, kind of like I was a bit out of order with the thing I said when you were having your little conniption fit the last time there. So, you know, just broaching the subject. Which it sounded about right to me because he does seem like a decent kind of a dude, and I can see him doing that. So look, it is very much up in the air, and we can't jump anywhere into panic station. But the phrasing of that thing from Koeman has me worried that it's a real thing, and the fact that we are here, Dave, is frustrating as all hell. Now, before we go to Konate, just a little mention. of the fact that we saw, didn't we, Grav and Verge arriving into the Dutch camp as well. Now, people are going to want to make a story up about this, but we saw their fullback. What's the lad's name? Remind me again.
Frimpong.
Frimpong doing his best Scouse accent to greet Grav, and big laughing heads on everybody, and obviously 2 and 2 together, and that makes 17. And he's definitely going to sign for us because he was mentioned 1 point with us, as every good player always is. So that's just by the by. We're not ignoring it, but it's also not a story, I think. Sorry, man, you want to say something there?
No, I agree, because I think people have all of a sudden gone, you've seen it. And I don't know whether it's tongue in cheek, like that's Trent's replacement. Like they could just be having a joke, like, let's not. We've got enough to worry about, like, without putting like who's the right back replacement just now on the list.
We're not even talking about Trent on this show because there's a slow, quiet, dark assumption that that's going to happen. And we're just going to ignore the elephant in the room over there, the large pachyderm looming in the corner. Just ignore it. I can't deal with that. We've got enough on our plate here with the Virgil Van Dijk story. Worse again, it's being linked to his fellow Colossus at centre-half, Konate, and it's the same club. And there's been PSG and Konate links for a long time, It feels almost as if, I think he said different things in the past, which again seemed vaguely favourable to PSG and Konate. What do we know about this one?
Yeah, it's kind of come out, and PSG like Konate, Real Madrid like Konate has come out as well at the same time. This is a player that has 2 years left to go, and we want to get that deal renewed. We know Konate said it himself that Liverpool have made him an offer, but quite rightly, and I say this in the terms of sometimes you've got to take your Liverpool hat off a little bit. If you were Konate's agent, you would be waiting to see, no, we need to see what happens. Because if they're going to stay, number one, we need to see what they get, because that will tailor what we'll accept a little bit and where we sit in the rankings. Because if he's getting, I'm making up numbers here for people, jump on me for this, but if Virgil's getting, say, 300 grand and we're offering Konate 150, his agent's going to know he's not half, let's be clear. So it's going to be a barometer, a marker, isn't it? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if Van Dijk, God forbid, was to go, Konate's agent, if he's going to stay, will probably be saying, well, my client's your main centre-half now, so you're going to reward him accordingly then, aren't you, to even make an offer and show that recognition in the first place. However, from digging around, Trev, as we do, and sort of trying to get as much info as we can, all our info is, and we kind of alluded to this on the last one, Konate's future may well be linked a little bit to Virgil van Dijk. That the info is, if Virgil is disappearing, and by the way, if Virgil does disappear to PSG, how attractive does that make it for Paris boy Konate? A club that wants him. He's almost, you could call him his mentor. I think that's a fair shout, couldn't you, as well? So that plays a part. So for me, not only if Virgil leaves, is it an absolute disaster, I think in terms of the knock-on and what it could mean for someone like Konate, you verge into cataclysmic event, don't you, realistically, in that sense as well. And listen, I know people will be saying, listen, there's war, there's famine, there's pest, all that, and I get it. We're talking, tongue-in-cheek a little bit. But, yeah, the Virgil decision could have a real knock-on for our info to Ibu and what he decides to do.
Yeah, look, if you've tuned into a transfer speculation show and you're going to get sort of making false equivalencies about how you should be suitably outraged about more serious things, you're probably doing life wrong. So, we'll see you again. Thanks for tuning in. But I will say this. It's not just over yet, and we're building up to a topic that none of us wants to be discussing, but it's a fascinating topic. But before we get there, we have to talk about Diaz and we have to talk about Bradley's contract. And I hope people recognize that we are not talking about Mo Salah because there is nothing new there yet, except the very dispiriting things that Mo has had to say about how he's not feeling the love and how it's likely that he's off. So that is where it is. We've got nothing new to be ruffling the feathers with there, but we also can't ignore the fact that that hasn't changed for the better either. But let's talk Diaz and let's talk Conor Bradley's contract.
Yes, it kind of links a little bit because there was almost an expectation that Luis Diaz and Liverpool would open contract talks, or they'd still be discussing it, as the season started, because 28, 2 years left to go in the summer. Obviously, there was a willingness to maybe, if a suitable offer came last summer, make that move, but it didn't, it didn't materialize. And here we are. I mean, the big two things in this so far for Luis Diaz are, as Fabrizio Romano said the other day, there is a concrete possibility Luis Diaz could leave this summer. Pipe Sierra, who's well known, the Colombian journalist who first broke this, is clearly connected with the Diaz camp, had tweeted not that long ago as well that, Luis Diaz is talking or looking to get a contract renewal offer from Liverpool, but we'll look at the options. Barcelona get mentioned as well at the same time. And I think this is a real possibility. And even at the weekend, I saw him sort of trading, and I remember what was in big gags at Wembley, Trev. This was funny. He was trading. I thought, I wonder what's going to happen with Diaz. And we were just looking around because we were in a nice spot in Wembley. And lo and behold, God is my witness, the next tier up was Papa Diaz, like doing a samba dance to one of the tunes over the Wembley tannoy, like Papa Diaz does, types of things. And all Lotson thought is, he's probably off in the summer to a warmer climate, isn't he? In all honesty, for Papa Diaz, maybe more than anything. But yes, so that's just an aside. So there's real question marks over Luis Diaz this summer. And then this one is an interesting one. And in terms of the worry, anyone's concerns, priorities and everything, it is well down the list for Liverpool right now because he's got time left on his contract, just to be clear. But for those who are on YouTube, you hopefully see that tweet on the screen from March the 3rd. Think how far back that is now that Liverpool are in talks with Conor Bradley over a new contract, keen to reward his progress. And it made sense, didn't it, Trev? Because the elephant in the room, the natural move from West Derby of someone to Real Madrid is expected to happen. So you thought, of course, that would make all the logical sense in the world. The only update recently that we've got on this is that even Bradley and his team are like, let's just slow down a little bit and just see the offer, because if Trent does leave, you're saying to us, you're my starting, Conor Bradley's the starting right back. So he's going to want, as his agents, are going to want to be rewarded accordingly, aren't they? If you're Conor Bradley's agent, Trev, if you've got any sense, you're saying, no, we need to wait to see if Trent does go, because then we're in a strong bargaining position, aren't we, for the deal we're going to get. Let's not sign up early, give Liverpool sort of the comfort of doing everything, like to get the best deal, you wait. And just to be clear, people, as I'm saying this, Conor Bradley is a Liverpool fan. Conor Bradley wants to stay at Liverpool, but it is a smart move by his agent to just wait and see what happens. I think we all know what will happen with Trent, and then progress it from there. And also, and I see people tweet about Bradley's injury record, that will come into the mix. So if he does an offer right now, it might just have that factored in, that, you need to prove yourself. And so we need to build that in accordingly. But if Trent goes, all of a sudden, that bargaining position lifts, doesn't it?
I'm fairly sure Trent's a Liverpool fan as well. Just for the record. We are going to talk about Chelsea, and we're going to talk about United, and we're going to talk about Saudi before we finish up, just so people know that those are the topics that are coming. But what's really sort of weighing on me as a fan at the moment is that so many of these things are happening at once, and you can't help but ask yourself a question, because we are in the dark so much. And listen, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think we'd all like to know where we stand in terms of our best players and whether they're going to keep playing for the club or not. But there are certain business realities that, like, I find stunningly boring. And I can even see the conversation going off there in a few directions about whether it's worth paying lads certain wages or what they'll be worth or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the kind of topic I understand people want to talk about. It's just doesn't grab me. What grabs me is, like I said earlier on, I want to have as many of our footballers that we love playing well for the club and achieving things. And it looks like we could be looking at the reality of a very big shuffle. In fact, we could be looking at a Klaus Schwab style great reset. It is wild. Let's just talk about it. Across the front line, Mo Salah has not got his contract yet. Darwin Nunez was already halfway out the door to Saudi Arabia. If it wasn't for stuff in his personal life, we're led to believe. Diogo Jota is being linked with Wolves very heavily at the moment. And he will start to lose value for us if we don't move him soon with his contract situation. Luis Diaz seemingly has one foot out the door at the nearest opportunity to get Papa Diaz dancing in the heat. That's the whole front line. Fede Chiesa is not trusted. Harvey Elliott doesn't seem to be trusted. The midfield, you'd like to think that have just arrived in the last while, all four of those guys will stay. But will Endo? Who knows? The back line, we've just talked about it. Van Dijk, Konate, Trent. We're already saying the one thing, if you take all of those stories out of it, the one thing everyone would have said is, well, we need a left back. Fucking hell, okay, right? So this is one of the two left backs is going to go as well, right? Dude, that's the entire team. That is a huge, huge shake-up. And you may think, well, that's not realistic. But is there not a part of you that fears, like I do, that there's some galaxy brain strategic approach in the background about let's get this thing over the line just by the skin of our teeth, and then we're just going to strip it back and do it the way we want to do it with the new crew that we have in situ? Because it does feel like there's the possibility for that wildly dramatic reset. Does that seem fanciful to you, or do you think it makes sense?
It's one of those theories, and it's right to call it theory. And for those that can't see, if you're on YouTube, you'll see on the screen, we've called this segment Hard Reset. That theory now comes onto the table, doesn't it? With the talk of Van Dijk possibly going, Trent going, Salah. And there is a part, and you're right, it doesn't excite us about sort of too much of finance, but you do wonder if there's the bods that be are looking and saying, well, we can clear about 1.5 million or so off the wage bill here, for a 33-year-old centre-back, a 33-year-old attacker. And okay, we don't want this kid to go, but if he's going to go, so be it. And sort of do a hard reset. And you could easily ignore that and say, no, they've offered contracts. But as everyone seems to understand, Liverpool have offered contracts on their terms. Well, we keep hearing that word. They're nowhere near a compromise, are we? Or people are going to have to compromise. And it doesn't seem to be getting any closer. Meanwhile, like countdown, that clock is ticking down towards the end of the season all the time. So it becomes tougher and tougher, you'd fancy, to agree deals. And at the same time, we're hearing that, and naturally, other big clubs in the world are courting these players and saying, if you want to play for us, we will drive a truck full of money to your house. It's understandable, isn't it, at the same time? Because all these three players are world class. They're elite players. There's no two ways about it. So that comes into your mix. You do just wonder, though, like you said, with the return of Michael Edwards and even the way things are set up, like Edwards dealing with sales right now, Ward dealing with the contracts, Hughes doing the sort of schmoozing agents, lining up incomings, whether if everything's sat down and all the stuff we've heard about the wage bill, that comes into the factor as well, just wanting to strip that right down. Also, even Trev, you think about Arne Slot's history at Feyenoord. This is a head coach that's used to big churn each season, isn't he? That's always been their model. He's used to having sort of 7 or 8 going. And I can see people saying, like, a title-winning team doesn't need upheaval. Let's just be clear on what me and Trevor said, people. We want these boys to stay. I think people just feel missing that in the comments. But we're talking about potential of, is there, validity to this hard reset theory? My worry is, from all the facts we're seeing now, what a couple of months ago, we would have gone, nah, not from what we're hearing. Time's ticking, and you are just starting to think like, hold on. Yeah, it's not something that sits nicely. And I've seen loads of people, even on Discord, have got different theories on this. But to me, if Virgil van Dijk leaves Liverpool and doesn't do a renewal, and Mo Salah departs as well, Trent, we kind of made our peace with. But if both those players go, I have no idea what's going on personally behind the scenes. I don't really care whether you want to call it a hard reset, smart business, any of that nonsense. For me, we just weakened our squad massively.
Yeah, look, there are loads of people who will try to justify the extreme oddballs who are FSG fans first, Liverpool fans second. That's just one of the weirdest stances I can imagine you could adapt. But most level-headed people, and I think, people that we have in our general audience will be of the same opinion as us. Like, no one wants to see these guys go, especially not the two best players in their positions in the world right now. And let's get this straight. PSG are looking at Virgil van Dijk and thinking, this dude is transformative for us. I'm not saying Marquinhos and Pacho aren't good. I'm just saying Virgil's better, right? They're looking at someone like Mo Salah perhaps and thinking, that guy could be transformative for us, even though they've got one of the best attacks I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Real Madrid might be thinking that. Who knows? We can't underestimate how attractive these players are to other clubs. And the fact that the contracts aren't nailed down, the fact that so many others are, up for grabs and have already had strong links away, it's something we have to consider. And I know at least one person there in the comments was saying, well, maybe that was the plan all along, and that we're just sort of way further on than people had expected or hoped, and Arne's overachieving with what he's done in the league. I mean, that again is possible, and it's the part of my brain that goes there is the part that it thinks, well, they're going to back themselves to do something quite dramatic here, like they did first time round, right? So look, it's got to be something we discuss. We're going to keep an eye on it, but like you, my default, my return to base setting is, please don't let Mo Salah leave. Please don't let Virgil van Dijk leave. Let's get those guys much more medals in a red shirt. Let's look around the rest of the Premier League, because two other clubs are sort of being linked with bits and bobs at the moment. Chelsea, of course. There's rumors of massive amounts of sales of Chelsea players. But of course, it being Chelsea, it's because they want to buy other players. So what do we know about what's going on there?
One of the funniest things, we didn't really talk about it, but it was over a month ago. Todd Bowley, Speedy Todd, was one of the key speakers at one of those Soccer X conferences out in the Middle East. And when he was asked to talk about, how he's portrayed and everything, what he said was, the English media just portray it through their lens. They don't really understand how football works, which I thought was kind of funny. Todd Bowley saying that after, trade deals and the man who sold the training ground and the hotel back to himself and everything. But it kind of got mentioned in this, Trev, that when he was in that conference about, do you remember how you tried to buy Sporting Lisbon, but you couldn't because you can't own two clubs at once and all this? He's like, yeah, there are limitations, but we'll see what happens with the City case and what that means for, football rules and ownership. And it's kind of funny that he was asked about, buying Sporting Lisbon, because if you can't buy the club, what you can do is buy all their players ahead of the summer. And what would you think if you're a Chelsea fan? You're thinking, right, let me think. Madueke, Mudryk, all that. We've got about 20 Sancho. We've got about 26 wingers. What do we need? That's right. We'll agree a deal ahead of the summer for a talented young winger. Now, just to be clear on this, from what I'm hearing and because I've never watched this kid, so I can't pretend I'm no scout on that. I won't lie. But from digging around, that there's high hopes for Quenda. He's supposed to be a real talent done at Sporting Lisbon, and Ruben Amorim wanted, didn't he, at Manchester United, who will also come on to, but they've already agreed this deal for about, I think it's 44, around that mark. So it's not cheap change. Oh, and by the way, Trev, there's only Willian Estevao, another player who can play winger, joining this summer. That young player, the South American kid they spent big money on. And there's only Kennedy Paez, another young winger who they spent a fortune on this summer. So already, before the summer starts, we know there are 3 players who can play on the wing coming into Chelsea. That's on top of, that team who desperately need a centre forward. But I guarantee you there must be someone in that boardroom who's going, we need a centre forward. We need a centre forward badly, a central focal point for the goals. Just hear me out though, lads. Have 16 wingers. Think of that Moneyball approach. I don't think Moneyball means have 16 wingers instead of 1 striker, but just honestly, 3 players who can play on the wing possibly coming in to Chelsea. And as someone said in the chat panel, Arsenal aren't going to take up the option on Raheem Sterling, are they, as well? So that's another winger coming. Just crazy. But Sporting Lisbon, remember Sporting Lisbon, because it doesn't stop there. Chelsea have also, and I'm probably going to butcher his name, agreed a deal with, you've guessed it, Sporting Lisbon for Dario Asugo, I think it's pronounced. He's on loan at another club, 22 million euros. And you've got to love how they do their contracts, because as they both have agreed, a 7+1 year deal. So 8 years, essentially, Trev, another one of these big contracts, ready for the Club World Cup. So literally 2 players from Sporting Lisbon, the 2 South American kids that are going to come, 4 players are joining Chelsea, and the window's not even open. And the brilliant thing is, they couldn't buy Sporting Lisbon. So God bless Beanie Twad. What does he do? Just buy all their young players instead. That's the alternative.
You'd like to say that you have a handle on just how Todd Bowley is going to get, but he just keeps bowling harder. And that is some wild stuff you've been describing. And God bless him and his constant source of entertainment for us. Just a shame they couldn't manage to actually beat Arsenal when they could have been useful to us there quite recently. Yeah. You mentioned United, and during the week, we all had a tremendous chuckle at the videos going out and about where poor old Ratcliffe there, man of the people, just talking to Gary Neville about how hard it is to earn a crust, and Gary's going, but who will feed the people? And Gary's doing his working class hero thing, and both of them are bullshitters, but it was entertaining. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, you've got the 3-pronged circus tent plans for the new stadium, and you go, okay, how does that tally with this new sort of cost-cutting things? And we learned then that this dude has some plans to tap up taxpayer money to fund this thing. How that's going to happen, I have no idea, but I think it's even fascinating that it would be floated out there. How then can we possibly be talking about them in terms of funds? Or are we talking about how United, if this thing is indeed on the horizon, and God knows they've done a very fancy promo video with the entirely boring tones of Gary Neville whining over it. It's obviously a real thing that they want to do. What's that going to do to their budget? We've seen what new stadiums do to clubs in terms of their ambition in the transfer market. It can be quite impactful.
I mean, Sir Jim, the Man United fan, dedicated, always wanted to come in and help and resolve the club. So we'll just ignore the fact he tried to buy Chelsea and the fact he tried to get a bit of Barcelona. But that aside, anyway, he comes in, he does his interview, and as he said, and these are his words, the club would have run out of money before Christmas. I mean, let's not pretend. The Glazers are our favourite ever United owners. They're just funny, aren't they, what they've done and how they stripped it back. But as Big Jim says, they would have run out of money before Christmas. So you think, wow, they start cutting back on Margaret's not allowed a free cheese sandwich or anything like that, and all the key cost-cutting exercises that go on to raise money. And then the big stadium plans come out, don't they, Trev? This £2.5 billion stadium. You remember that club that we're going to run out of money by Christmas. And as he also said in that interview, all his money's pretty much gone as well. The amount he invested in servicing the debt and everything else, they're going to do this. And I mean, it's just scandalous a little bit, isn't it? Because Andy Burnham, and he's even used his old Northern powerhouse phrase that he used at his Labour Days, didn't he, for at certain times, that this stadium can elevate us and, you know, blah, 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 and all this, i.e., let's be crystal clear, we need taxpayers' money to do this because we could borrow to the hilt, but they can't really borrow anymore. And if anyone's thinking anything about that, Jim Ratcliffe also mentioned in his interview, we can't just keep going to the banks. That was a phrase he used. So you can dress it up, but they're trying to get taxpayers' money, aren't they? Because that's probably the way they're going to have to do it if they can indeed build this giant circus tent monstrosity thing with its giant poles, you know, that they're trying to do. It's just absolutely insane. But as a few journalists, and we do digging around and asking like we normally are, they're starting to get blanked a bit on the details, Trev, because people are asking, well, if you do get this grant, bursary, whatever you want to call it, how are you going to prove that that money's entirely separate? I.e., if Manchester United needs 300 million or whatever it is to service its debts and keep it going and all the things, because and he talked about in that interview, didn't he? We've got to pay this transfer this summer and this and this and this. If the taxpayers are to give them a huge chunk of change, you know, and the billion quid they're looking for, how can the taxpayer guarantee that that money goes towards a stadium exclusively? How can we separate those? You know, like, because how do we know we are not giving our tax dollars for them to get another shit winger, basically? You know, there is like real questions which journalists, as they say, are asking United about it. And even, you know, all the part of this campaign, Andy Burnham and all those are very silent on this point. So it is one to watch because all of a sudden, my worry is if Manchester United, who we know we're going to run out of money before Christmas, start making signings this summer, it's a case of where they got that money from. National insurance, education cuts. That's what that is, the first thing. You know, it's just crazy, isn't it? So there are a few questions, and it is really one to keep an eye on. But it doesn't tally that a club that was going to run out of money before Christmas now wants to build a 2 and a bit billion stadium, and as also their owner or their part owner, whatever you call him, saying we can't just keep going to the banks for money. Tell you what, so I hope some investigative journalist is right on this.
The potential for a fantastic story in this is just through the roof. And the cognitive dissonance between, within hours, seeing Gary Neville quizzing him up about why Margaret and Hilda can't have a cheese sandwich and why Eric and Waza can't come back and do a charity match to pay for the ex-players' funds or whatever. And then literally less than a couple of hours passed, and I'm seeing him narrating the promo video for the sci-fi big top that's going to be their new home. It's wild, and it's tremendously entertaining, and God bless them for it, because we do need a distraction. Let's finish just with a reference to Saudi, because we thought, we started talking about this a while ago, that Saudi were the big disruptors and they were going to have this massive impact. And it was initially, and then it went away. And now it seems to be a slow build back to where they are genuinely players in this market again, having gone quite quiet for a couple of windows.
Yeah.
What do you make of the potential for them being that disruptive force again in the summer to come?
Real chance. Yeah, they had last summer off a little bit, didn't they? They sort of trimmed their belt, so they just managed it. And then they got a bit crazy in January, didn't they? To be fair, with the Nunez situation, Duran, a few others, they made a few moves, didn't they? And you thought, okay, they're going to go again. Now, it's just so hard for the world of football to bring Saudi Arabia in line with how everything else works in Europe, CONCACAF, Copper, all the other associations, because they're that rich, they kind of just do what they want a little bit. And do you remember we even had that story last January where FIFA were threatening them because they weren't paying the final instalment to the new Saints in Wales for like a 30 because the player they thought was crap. So they just refused to play it. Like, no, that's not how it works. You can't wait and see how the player does and then refuse to pay it. Like, they just do, you're trying to rule over billionaires and people who money doesn't really mean that much to because they've just got bucket loads of it. So it is different in that sense. The other big thing we're getting now, and there's a few eyes being drawn to it, that Club World Cup is coming up, isn't it, Trev? Right as almost our season ends, that starts. And it's almost a case of that the crossover is so small, as in the Premier League window, I think, in Saudi is aligned to open about the 12th of June. And then that Club World Cup starts, I think it's the 15th of June in America. Now, there's 2 Saudi teams in that. And what's already being talked about is, I can't remember who it's one, Al Hilal's one, and there's another one. But there's even talk of players moving to Al Hilal just for that tournament.
Wow.
So Saudi can showcase their best possible team, to the world and say, look at us, type of thing in that regard. So don't be surprised if that happens. But we know the likes of Darwin-Nunez is very admired. Very admired. So in that regard, would it surprise you if they're trying to do a deal where it's like literally done just before that starts up? And it's literally that short a crossover in that regard. So it is one to really keep an eye on for the summer. They may be almost the first movers because of that of the summer window.
Yeah, smashing angle, that one. And very, very high potential, I think, for a couple of mad moves there with that one, maybe including one of our own. Or maybe even 2 of our own. Let's see how that one works out. We've already said it. This is a mad time. This is one of the most unsettled I've felt in ages, and it's wild that we're 6 wins away from establishing ourselves as league champions. I'm a little bit unsettled about how people are already talking about how it's done. I do understand that mentality, and you don't want to think that these lads are going to fall off so badly that it's not going to happen. But there's just that feel at the moment about like, can we resettle here? Can we just get back to some sort of solid winning ways, and then maybe you can have an adult conversation about all the massive upheaval that needs to happen. But look, we want to say thanks to everyone who's watching live. Fair play to you. Good numbers there again, Dave. Thanks to you if you're commenting, and if you're just chatting amongst yourselves in the comments, that's also great. Gives us something to sort of track whether we're on track or not. We do appreciate that. And as ever, I appreciate Dave and all the work he does to put this show together in terms of gathering the information. So yet again, cheers, buddy.
Yeah, it's a fun one. Let's just hope by the time we come back, we are not using the word or phrase hard reset anymore.
Just don't want to think about it. It's just not okay. So make it go away, Liverpool. Thanks very much. And we'll talk to you all very soon.